ADHD. I'm going to share 10 misconceptions about ADHD today and talk about the facts and answer any questions from anybody that joins live. While I'm waiting for people to get notified and to join in, I'm going to talk a little bit about why this is such a passion for me, why it's so important for me to help people with living with ADHD, families, students, college students, and adults. It's so important because I am surrounded by uh, people with neurodiversity. I have dyslexia, neurodiversity. I've already talked a little bit about my little one that lives with ADHD, and a lot of my family and really close friends actually also are living with ADHD. So, to some extent, this has always been an interest and a passion. As a psychologist, I started my first degree was in human development psychology. So, I started working with little ones that had Down syndrome and autism. And I was thinking about being a school psychologist. So, in my interest in children, then of course, ADHD as one of the challenges that is often identified in childhood was something that I studied. And in my career, I certainly have worked with many people who have lived with challenges around ADHD. But it really became not just something that I could do, but a passion at the beginning of COVID when my little one was really struggling. It's interestingly, I found that COVID caused many people living with ADHD, at least the people that I worked with, were having challenges, extra challenges. It really seemed to throw people living with ADHD off, and the change in the usual, I think, patterns of things, the isolation, all of those things seem to bring a lot of difficulty, and especially in our household. So that is what pushed me to want to learn more, understand more, so that I could help my clients more, but also to help my little one more. And so I went to the Amen Clinic and did a 50-hour course that added to the expertise I already had, with more about learning about brain scans and so many other things. And I've read 3 zillion books and attended webinars. I'm a lifelong learner. I love to learn. And so any of the areas that I focus on, like stress management, I am always constantly learning more. Things are always changing and there are new discoveries, new research. And so I love digging in and finding out more. And I really love finding out something new and interesting, latest research, um, different understandings, different ways of explaining things, and integrating that into the work that I do. So that's all what brings me to this passion for ADHD and helping people understand. A funny story. My little one just did this 1 week law program, and I'm talking to the lawyer that's in charge of everything. And we were talking really about food allergies, and I could do a whole nother talk on living with peace, inner peace around food allergies. Okay, I think my internet is a little unstable. There we go. And so I'm explaining something about food allergies, and then somehow that got us into a conversation about ADHD. And I find myself explaining stuff to her. And when I stopped, she said, everything you just said went over my head. I'm a lawyer, and I'm not really interested in, she didn't say that exact word, but that's the gist of it, that she wasn't really interested in getting to know more about the workings of the ADHD mind. She was really interested in figuring out what she needed to do to help the children in this program function. I understand that, but it made me think there's so many people that are living with family members, good friends, themselves, personally, or their children with ADHD that do need to know more, because knowledge is power. And the more you understand, the more you can have inner peace. That understanding can help you make the mindset shifts that you need in order to be patient and understand. So, all of that is part of why we're talking about misconceptions and facts today. And with that preamble, let's get right to it. Let's start talking about some of the misconceptions and the facts. So, the first misconception I want to talk about is that ADHD is just a childhood disorder, and that children grow out of it. Right? Many of us think that, and I'm pretty sure at the beginning of my career, I thought that was true as well. But ADHD is neurodivergence. It's a neurodiversity, right? The brain is wired differently. And I learned that when I took this course with the Amen Clinic. We studied brain scans. And it was so interesting to see and compare how different wiring shows up in the brain. We can see which areas of the brain light up more and which areas of the brain are quieter when they should be lighting up. And this all demonstrates the pattern of the brain for people living with ADHD. Well, our brains do grow and develop, but it's not something we grow out of. So, although people learn coping patterns and they learn how to adjust, just like I've learned how to adjust to not being able to spell because of my dyslexia. So I love Grammarly, and I've had editors that help me. We learn how to adjust these things. Some people learn how to adjust, and some people learn how to adjust so well that it looks like that they've grown out of ADHD. But the reality is, our brains don't change that much, right? There's so much rewiring we can do, but the basic structure of our brain stays the same so that children with ADHD are adults with ADHD. And I think it's really important to know that there are many people, my age and older, that would never get someone professional to identify for them that this is what they're struggling with. There's so many people, and I'm probably going to be slipping into misconceptions I'm going to talk about later, but there's so many people who think that they are, just lazy, that they don't understand why they're late all the time. They don't understand why they have so many difficulties doing things that seem to come easy to other people. And it may just be this neurodiversity. And that just means that they need other methods, other systems, things that are proven to work with people who have brains that are set up like theirs. So let me get back to the misconceptions, and then we'll talk more about some of those issues. So, misconception two: ADHD is caused by poor parenting and a lack of discipline. Well, if you follow the first one, that it's about the way the brain is wired, that it is definitely not caused by poor parenting or a lack of discipline. However, if you don't understand how the ADHD brain works, then it makes it really hard to discipline. It makes it really hard to figure out how to parent somebody with ADHD. So, one of the reasons I am putting together this coaching program for parents and families is really so that I can help parents lower their frustration and find more peace and joy in their children by better understanding that your child's not lazy. Yeah, your child, the motivation system is different. And because the motivation system is different, some of the things that might work with one child are not going to work with another child. But there are things that will work with this child, and requires a little bit of exploration, a little bit of trial and error, but there are definitely things that can work. For example, um, one of the things that I did is help somebody create a system for getting chores done. And this system required that the parent give the one major thing that the child liked, which was candy, right? Candy. And so I had the parent cut the candy up into small pieces, create a list of the chores that needs to be done. And the system started with every time the parent and child started doing the chores together, making sure that parent mirrored for the child and modeled for the child what the chores should look like, what was acceptable. At the end of every milestone, so that was finishing a chore, and sometimes it meant even just being engaged in the process, parent gave a small piece of candy, right? And we cut this candy up really small piece of candy. That was the process, right? And it seems and it might sound like a long process. And it started out kind of lengthy in terms of having to reinforce very small steps. But few weeks later, it didn't take that long in the grand scheme of things. A few weeks later, the child was able to, they had a list, they knew what to do. They were, parent had to get them started. Okay, it's time to do chores. We make an agreement what time a chore is going to get started, time to get chores done. But then the child was able to get through the list quite quickly and effectively, and then come get a small reward. And that works, and it continues to work. So there are ways to get this done, but it starts with parents not feeling like there's something wrong with them, right? And understanding that you just need different systems for discipline here. All right, so that's misconception number 2. Number 3, people with ADHD are lazy or unintelligent. So intelligence has nothing to do with neurodiversity. We have intelligence is one concept, right? Uh, and we'll use there are many definitions of intelligence, and there's some that believe that there are also different kinds of intelligence. But just for simplicity's sake, in this moment, let's say intelligence is how fast you process things. And that, again, that is a simplified definition and not the only definition of intelligence. But how fast you process things is a separate issue from how your brain is wired with attention, and focus. Right? They're two separate things. So one doesn't have anything to do with the other, meaning that we have people who are living with ADHD that are brilliant, Einstein brilliant and beyond, and we have people living with the ADHD that struggle with some basic things. Whole spectrum, two separate things. The other thing is that people living with ADHD are lazy. I wish I could, it's not too many words in the English language I like to get rid of. Lazy is probably one of them, because lazy is one of those terms that people use when they don't understand what's going on internally for somebody. Lazy can be something on the surface, and underneath can be ADHD and not understanding how to motivate this person. It can be trauma, right? Underneath lazy could be depression. Like, there's so many things that can lead to what somebody might call lazy, which is definitely not lazy. And so I don't use that term. I like to look beneath what's going on for this person, because I believe that everybody wants to get something done. Okay? And so you know that your child really wants to play their video games, but you're taking away the games until they get, their homework done. But yet they're not doing their homework, but you know that they really want to do these games. That's not lazy. That's something else going on. And it's up to us to figure out what else is going on. And I also know adults that call themselves lazy. Well, that kind of harsh self-talk doesn't help you get anything done. It just makes you feel bad about yourself. So I work with those adults to better understand themselves, better understand what motivates them, set up systems so that they can get what needs to get done. And more than anything, to stop using language like lazy that just makes them feel bad and doesn't, if anything, that makes the same behavior that they're labeling as lazy, reinforces it, makes it happen more, because now they feel bad. So now they're depressed. Now they're gone from just being unmotivated or not having the right motivation to feeling depressed and bad about themselves, which really digs into it. So I don't use the word lazy. When I'm working with people, I stop them when they say that, and I encourage us to look deeper. What's going on underneath that? Because when we understand what's underneath something called lazy, then we can address the real core problem. We can address the trauma. We can address the motivation issues. We can address depression, whatever is going on there. So ADHD has nothing to do with intelligence, and it is not about having a good work ethic. It's really about differences in things that are motivating and the setup of the brain, the neurodiversity. Okay. So one more, and then I'm going to take a break and see if there's anybody that has any questions. Misconception number 4. Medication is the only effective treatment for ADHD. And wait, before I even get to answering that, let me stop and say that I'm saying ADHD, but I'm covering ADD and ADHD. And one of the things that, there's some things in the psychological world, in the medical world, where there are differing opinions. And one of them is about ADD and ADHD. So I'm just saying ADHD right now, just to make things simple for myself as I'm doing all of this talking. But some believe that ADD, attention deficit, and I stop at the last D because I also don't like to talk about disorders. I think disorder is a very medical term. It's a label that is not I prefer to focus on the symptoms and the challenges, and I don't know if it's always helpful for people to think of themselves as having a disorder instead of having neurodiversity. I don't see dyslexia as a disorder. I see it as my neurodiversity, and I know that it gives me certain challenges, but it also gives me certain superpowers. I see the same with ADHD and ADD. So the difference between the two is the H, which is hyperactivity. Some believe that people who have ADD don't have hyperactivity, and others believe that everybody has ADHD, and the H, the hyper, for some is very much on the outside, very fidgety, very active, always moving. And for some, it's on the inside where the thoughts are jumping around. Either way you go, uh, there's enough overlap, right, that many of the same strategies, systems, challenges exist, whether you say or know somebody that has ADD or ADHD. So just want to make sure I clarify that when I say ADHD, it that's not how you identify, or not the label that you've been given for your child, your niece, nephew, family member, then I'm still covering the same thing. ADD all fits. All right, back to the misconception. Misconception number 4. Medication is the only effective treatment for ADHD. Not true, right? Medication is helpful for some people and helpful for managing some symptoms, but it is not the only way to go. Um, Behavioral therapy, coaching, like what I do, lifestyle adjustments, which is what we cover in coaching, uh, food changes in diet, and exercise, all of these things can help manage. And I find really that what people need is a combination. And one of the things that I help people with is kind of figure out which of these pieces, right? Supplements, natural supplements can be used instead of medication. Exercise is one of the best things for ADHD. And I read a whole book about how exercise is great for everything. And there were, I think, more than one chapter that focused on how exercise is wonderful for ADHD. So it's really about figuring out which of these things and in which combination of these things, and sometimes even what time of the day for these things works for this particular brain, for this particular person. And then once we figure out all those pieces, making sure that they're used consistently, and making sure that when there are major shifts, like moving from the school year where there's a certain pattern to the summer, that we plan for those shifts and that we help with those shifts. Because very often one of the places that is challenging for people living with ADHD is when there are those major shifts in life, which is why I think so many people had difficulty with COVID, because we had this very sudden shift from the world being one way to the world being another way. All right, so I just want to check in and see if there are any questions. And I'm pretty new to figuring all of this out. So it may take me just a second to figure out even where the questions would be. Here we go. Comments. Okay. So I don't see any questions at the moment. So I'm going to keep talking about the misconceptions. As it's so much fun to think about and talk about how much we've learned, because many of these misconceptions have arrived because people didn't understand. We started to recognize something's going on, but didn't understand what it was. So misconception number 5 is ADHD only affects boys, right? And or males if we're talking about adults. And I think that one might have arisen because boys tend to be much more active and physical. But the truth is, there's no gender difference. That males and females are both get ADHD. And things might show up differently, but things show up differently for boys and girls all the time. Some of that has to do with the way we're socialized. Some of that has to do with the other ways that there are literally differences in our brains and in the male and female brain. But both genders have ADHD. So there is no, it's not just a boy thing. Misconception number 6, people with ADHD can't focus on anything. Right? And I think that's a common misconception, right? You hear attention deficit and you think people can't focus. Well, the reality is most people with ADHD have this ability to hyper focus on things that they find very interesting. And in fact, that hyper focus can be a superpower where someone living with ADHD can spend hours learning about something that they're really interested in. And the challenge is very often it's that middle ground, and we all have things that we're very interested in and things that we are not that interested in, but we know we need to do. And one of the things that can be challenging for people living with ADHD is not the stuff that they're very interested in. In fact, those things that they'll go all day, and sometimes the challenge is to pull them away from those things because other things need to get done. It's that stuff in the middle that's not fun to do but needs to get done. And so finding systems, figuring out motivation and to help, and starting with understanding that there's nothing wrong with that, right? In fact, we all feel that way. There's a lot of stuff that I don't like doing. I just have systems in place to help me get those things done. And helping somebody find those systems to stop feeling bad about themselves, to stop negative self-talk about the fact that they haven't gotten these things done. But let's create a system to get it done. And sometimes those systems are outsourcing and being okay with that. Okay? Not feeling like you have to do everything yourself. Being okay with outsourcing some things, being okay with partnering with people. One of the systems that I regularly help people living with ADHD employ is partnering. That's why we're going to be doing Task Tuesday in the coaching program. So Task Tuesday is all about partnering with everybody that is together. We're going to meet. We're going to set out on tasks together at the same time to get those tasks done. And that's harnessing the power of community, of connection in order to get things done. It helps with setting it at a specific time. So anyway, there are many ways to get things done. What's important to know is that people with ADHD can focus and hyper focus on things. That's what we call it when there's so much focus on things that sometimes it's hard to pull them back into other things. But that can be a superpower if it is directed correctly and if it's balanced with getting some of the other things that need to get done. Number 7, ADHD is not a real disorder. It's just an excuse for poor behavior. Well, it is a legitimate neurobiological, and I don't like to use disorder, so I'm trying to stay away from that word, neurobiological difference that's identifiable in the brain. I've seen the brain scans, and there is definitely a difference in how the person who's living with ADHD, how the areas of their brain that light up and the areas of the brain that are quiet when they should be lighting up, there's a difference. So this is legitimate. This is scientifically proven. It is not just something that people make up as an excuse for poor behavior. However, there are things that we can do to help improve functioning, to help improve getting things done, to help improve joy and peace when living with this disorder. And so seeing the brain scans and helping to understand how the brain works helps with all of that. Number 8, individuals with ADHD grow out of it. I think I alluded to this before. And I totally, again, you can understand where this misconception comes from because children that have struggled, if they come up with good coping mechanisms, and some people do, some people figure them out on their own, some people's parents are able to figure them out. And so if they have good coping mechanisms when they grow up, then it's not as noticeable. Also, we all go through changes, right? None of us, you, the adult listening to me, and I'm assuming that it's mostly adults watching this, you are not the same person you were when you were 5. It's Not possible. You're not the same person who you were when you were 5. And so we all grow up. And as we all grow up, the structures of our brains change. That's the challenge with adolescence. The whole adolescence is about our brains changing to rewire, to get rid of things that we don't need and to incorporate things that we do. And so we all change. Some individuals with ADHD change in ways that mask, right? That diminish their symptoms, that they figure out how to deal with their symptoms better. And so it's may not be as noticeable. But some of you, especially those of you who are my age and older, may be living with ADHD and don't even know it because nobody was able to identify it for you or help you identify it as a child. And I understand that because I wasn't formally diagnosed with dyslexia until college. Um, Even though the signs were there, but nobody could read the signs because people didn't understand as much as we understand now. Do you know that when I was in second grade, I wasn't reading? Okay. However, when I think I was 1, and my mom's not around to correct me, but I'm pretty sure I was 1, and I could speak in 5-word sentences, which was notable. The doctor noted this down. My mom didn't realize that all babies didn't do that. And so, for somebody who could speak in 5-word sentences at 1, but by second grade, and I don't want to take the time to figure out how old I was in second grade, could not read. Something wasn't adding up. So my mom took me out of the Catholic school I was going to and put me into public school. Third grade, I went into public school. I started out at the bottom, the lowest reading level. And by the end of third grade, with resource rooms, so I had extra help, by the end of third grade, I went to the top reading level. And it was really just they had this system, and you have to be my age to understand what the system and probably in education. But I remember because it scarred me. It was called Distar, and that system, whatever it was, did not work for my brain. My brain could not figure out what that was all about, and then I couldn't read. When I got to public school and I got extra help, I was able to then, make up some time and I was able to read. But even then, even with those challenges, I was not labeled, diagnosed. Nobody noticed. Nobody could tell me that what I was living with was dyslexia. And I think that it can be even more complicated with ADHD because so much of it can be internal. And therefore, there are a lot of adults out there that know that they're struggling, know that they have difficulty getting things done, know that they are using, waiting until the last minute to finish reports and can't figure out why, with the best intentions, they can't get those reports done earlier. And yet, you know, they don't know that this might be part of what's going on, is that it's their wiring. So I invite you to, schedule a call with me. Let's talk about it. Let me see if I can help you figure out if that might be what it is. And you don't need a formal diagnosis. And if you do and you want that, I can help you figure that system out as well. But you might just need to join us for Task Tuesday. You might need to learn a little bit more. But either way, I love to have a conversation with you about why you think this might be one of your struggles. Let's figure that out together. So feel free to contact me. Okay, I'm going to take a break from before I go into 9 and 10 because I think I see a question. And I don't know if we can post that question up, but the question is, what are some transformations that you have helped adults with ADHD make? How has their work, life, and personal productivity increased? Thank you for that question. What are some transformations have I made for adults with ADHD? Ooh, so that's a good one. I have worked. I'm going to start with a college student who's an adult, and then I'm coming up with a couple of examples. And that I've worked with so many people. I've got to try to narrow it down. First, let me say that the examples that I give, I change the names. I make sure that I don't provide any identifying facts, and because I'm protecting the people that I work with, unless they've given me explicit permission to share their story in full. So I worked with a college student, and I actually started working with a student when they were in high school. and they were doing pretty well. We worked on coming up with systems to get homework done because that's one of those things. I think homework's hard for many people, ADHD or not. But we worked for with a system to get homework done, and a lot of that was partnering up with other students so that they could, have that social connection, have that time commitment, and that worked really well. Of course, not that didn't work for all assignments, but we did that as much as possible to help her get the homework done. And when that wasn't the case, right, then it was more accountability partners. So then with the accountability partner, having that, sending a text. I'm starting on the math assignment now. I'll let you know when I get to this question, right? So again, still harnessing the relationships, harnessing connecting with people, harnessing accountability, really breaking things down into small bits and pieces. That was huge in the transition to college because in high school, so many things are set out for you. When you get to college, you really have to do that for yourself. And so I really helped her break a big assignment down into small pieces and then schedule those pieces so that she could focus on a piece at a time and not get overwhelmed. Because what she found is that she'd wait till the last minute and she'd get overwhelmed and then she'd throw her hands up and not get anything done. And so we prevented that by coming together, looking at the beginning of the school year. What's great about college is you get a syllabus and you kind of know what's coming. And so we'd spend a session or two looking at all that and kind of plotting it out. And then she used me for accountability, checking in, how is this going? How are you on that? And helping move through those stuck points. So got through college, and then COVID hit. And just as graduating from college, COVID hit, and that kind of shut everything off, and really she got stuck. And so we spent some of our sessions again, like we're going to do in Task Tuesday, doing some tasks together, working on a resume, and got her volunteering as an easy entry into back into the world. But that volunteering, that easy entry, then that was like let the floodgates open. And that's led to a job, right? That led to another job. And now she's back on track. It helps that the world is getting back on track as well, but getting out there, getting being able to find out I can volunteer and it's not as tragic as I thought, really, really helps. So that's her story. And then there was John, who came to me. Again, this is somebody else. Again, COVID was a big thing, so a lot of people living with ADHD came from COVID. So I'm thinking of John in particular, who came at the beginning of COVID, really thrown off by working from home. Right, had all the structure at work, had all this assistance right there at work, and then now working from home, couldn't figure out how to get the day started, couldn't figure out how to structure for himself. And so together, I helped John create a system from home that worked for him. And that was, putting things on a to-do list, but not getting overwhelmed because some people to-dos can be overwhelming. And at first, when he started, it was like, oh, this is too much. But breaking it down into a smaller list and really being able to make it was an electronic to-do list so that all he had to do was go to the list and giving himself permission to move things off that list, connecting and making his accountability partner his secretary, right? So that he connected with the secretary in the morning and the evening. Together, they went through the to-do list, moved things, made it reasonable, and in the evening reviewed things, moved things around, kind of started setting up for the next day. But that accountability in the morning and the evening really helped John not feel as overwhelmed and connected, where he felt much more connected when he was in the office, and it was much harder when he was working from home remotely. And so it gave him accountability in terms of he had to get to work because somebody was going to be there waiting to connect with him at the beginning of the day and the end of the day. And that really helped, got him moving, really setting an alarm to get up and go for a walk and exercise. That movement was helpful. Movement helps the brain so many ways. Too much to say right here and now, but movement is great. So we scheduled in some movement for him. We had him connected and also set up some systems to break things down in terms of what he had to do, so that when he had to do big reports and stuff like that, so that he could pull in more human connection. For John, he really missed talking to people in the office. And so helping him find, understand, label that, understand that. Like, it wasn't something that I think he even fully understood. And that the human connection was so much a part of the motivation for him to get things done. And then figuring out ways to bring that in. So then scheduling more virtual meetings with people, doing video meetings so that he at least could see people, even if as opposed to just phone meetings, and sometimes scheduling connected work, which is one of my favorites. So those are our two little stories, and I'm going to tell more stories when I come back next week, and I'm going to tell a lot more a lot many. I'm going to tell more stories about the things that I've done coaching people. But back to the misconceptions. Misconception number 9: only children can be diagnosed with ADHD. And I said earlier that many adults haven't been, because mostly it is noticed and diagnosed and focused on with children. But children, adolescents, adults, anybody that is challenged with time and getting things done may be experiencing ADHD. You may be experiencing depression. It might be about trauma, so it could be other things as well. And certainly getting some information, talking to somebody like me, talking to a professional, can help you figure out which of these things you may be struggling with. And when you have a better understanding of what you're struggling with, then it makes it easier to figure out what to do about it, as opposed to just feeling bad about it. So definitely adults can be and are diagnosed with ADHD. And one of the things that I do is help people get connected. I usually go to the Amen Clinic because I love the Amen Clinic. They do a wonderful job of brain scans and really helping people understand not only whether or not they have neurodiversity issues, but understand how that shows up for them in particular. Right? Which are the challenges, which areas are most challenged, and what are some of the things that might help. So yes, adults definitely can get diagnosed or identify which challenges they have. Try not to use diagnosis too much, but that is the common term for it. Last but not least, number 10: people with ADHD are always hyperactive and impulsive. Well, the fact is, ADHD symptoms can manifest differently for each person. Right? Just like, some of us are really good dancers and some of us are not. We don't say that somebody that's not a good dancer has a disorder, but that our brains are all wired differently. And so people who have ADHD, is a whole spectrum out there. And some people have a lot of challenges in one area and not so many challenges in another area. It's important for us to look at each individual and figure out, well, where are the areas of challenge and where are the superpowers? Where are the areas of strength? Because when you know those superpowers, you can harness, right, that the superpowers to help balance out the challenges. And so that's why it's important. And when people know their superpowers, right, they can feel better about themselves and battle any of the challenges emotionally with ADHD. Because what often comes along with challenges in getting things done is feeling bad, feeling lazy, all those kinds of negative self-talk things. So it's really important for us to focus on what we have and where our talents are, so that we can balance out the challenges. But we all have challenges. Everybody has challenges, whether you have neurodiverse issues or not. We all have challenges. It's about figuring out how to live with them, tenacity, right? How to get over, around, and through whatever obstacles are in your way to reach your goals. So to wrap this up, I want to say 3 things. The three things that I think are most helpful in navigating life. That's your life if you are living with ADHD, think you might be living with ADHD, or your children are living with ADHD. I think the first thing that is most important is information. Right? Having some better understanding of what's going on in this brain, I think, is your first step. Because when you have information is power, right? Knowledge is power. When you understand better what's going on, then you can figure out what to do about it. But it's hard to figure out what to do about it until you first understand what's going on. So part of what I am so excited to share in my coaching program is some education, right? Really helping people better understand their brains or the brains of their children. The second thing is community, right? Community is so important. And I say this as an introvert, right? I am an introvert and the only child of an only child. If I could figure out how to live alone and not have to depend on other people, I would have figured it out already. But that's just not how humans are designed. And even I, the introvert of the introverts, knows this, that we all need community. It has been so helpful to me navigating ADHD with my little one over COVID to have one of my best friends live 7 minutes away, also navigating ADHD, so that as I've shared with her about the things I've learned and helped her come up with systems and help me come up with systems because sometimes you're just so close to it that you need some help sorting through things. That is lighten the load, right? And sometimes it's just even great to share the frustration, to vent and get it out, and then you can get back to, okay, so now what are we going to do about it? So community is really important. This is a group coaching program, so that there's built-in community. And community is also important because although I have so much experience and I've worked with countless people and helped people come up with a lot of systems, I don't know everything. There's somebody else in the community that might have just dealt with this one thing and might have some suggestions that are really helpful. Or somebody else in the community that is dealing with this right now. And it's just so nice to be with somebody else that's going through the same thing. So community is so important. And finally, one of my superpowers is systems, creating systems. It's one of those things that I don't even realize I'm doing all the time, that I'm always doing for myself and for all those around me. So it's really fun for me to help people create systems. And when people are struggling, right, finding a system that works and being able to implement it and move from the frustration to productivity and peace is such a wonderful experience. So I so love helping people create those systems because I love helping people move from frustration to peace and productivity. So systems are wonderful, and that seems to be one of my areas of superpower. So I'm so happy that you joined me for these misconceptions, and I want to offer you an opportunity to talk to me directly, to find out more about what I'm offering, to see if it's a good fit. This is a small program, so there's not space for anybody and everybody. So I want to make sure that this is a good fit for you. And if not, then I want to make sure that I help you find the program, the information, whatever you need that is going to help you move from frustration to peace and productivity. So with that, I like to say thank you so much for joining me. And if you're watching on the replay, thank you so much for being here and tuning in. I hope this list of misconceptions and the facts have helped you have better understanding of ADHD. And if you take away nothing else, stop using lazy, right? And understand that anytime you think lazy, there's something else going under there, and it's important to try to figure out what's going on. Because when we understand really what's going on underneath, then we can start to make changes. So find out more at drakhu.com, drakhu.com/ADHD. And I hope to see you back next week, where I'm going to give more examples of the people I've worked with and how I've helped them move from stress and anxiety and frustration to inner peace and productivity. Thank you.